Hi, I'm Jay Horner. Welcome to this, the first of my comic art workshop. I'm teaming with Hartlepool Borough Council to deliver you some great content and show you how to make your very first comic page. There are a few things you're going to need, however. First of all, I recommend a ruler. Okay, doesn't have to be a T-square like this. It can be any kind of ruler. I just like these because this keeps you with a straight edge. Pencil, again, doesn't have to be a fancy mechanical one. I just like these. If you're anything like me, you're going to make a load of mistakes, so you're going to need an eraser. Some fine liner pens. These can be picked up pretty cheap online or from supermarkets. And some broad liner pens as well. Just a simple black marker will do the trick, or you've got these brush pens. They do run up a bit more money, but the results you get are stunning. And of course, your paper. So, A4 sketch pad, easily the most recommended out of all of these bits of paper that we've got. But this is what you're going to use to make your roughs. You can make your main artwork on it as well if you like, but personally, I like to work on A3. Nice big size, get a bit more detail in, and easy to see your mistakes that you need to erase later. Got a script that will be available if you download, okay? So you can add your own characters into this and your own situations. It's very open to interpretation. Right, let's get cracking, shall we? Right, so first thing we got is our script. So I've written this, it should be available to download. We'll keep you updated in the links below on that. So what we got here is 4-panel script, okay? So that of course is your 4 panels of comic artwork. So panel 1, cityscape at night, rain comes from the sky and a crack of lightning. Pretty standard setup. You could say it's actually a bit cliched, but this is a good way to get you started on how to make these sorts of comics. You got panel 2, which is set outside of a jewellery store with the doors wide open like it's just been burgled. Panel 3, hands in a pile of jewels and diamonds. And panel 4, you see your villainous character holding up those diamonds. So, how are we going to set out our page? So you got 4 panels. This is just doing thumbnails, okay? So your standard one is you can make 4 normal panels like this, okay? Nothing wrong with that, but it is a little bit boring, let's be honest with you. So how can we spice things up? So you got a cityscape at night. That's only going to have 1 line of dialogue, which is this one. It's good being the villain, which is going to be in a box. So you can keep that quite thin. So a bit thin artwork in there. And then the outside of a jewellery store. Now you're going to need a bit of a bigger panel for that. So what you can do is then have a normal sized panel there. And then for the next panel, a similar one there. That makes it a little bit more interesting. But what I would personally do is get your thumbnail, do a small panel at the top with the cityscape, because then also cities take a lot of drawing because you're drawing architecture, and you are drawing it at night, so you can have a little bit more shadow in there to cover up any of the detail, because you've got to fly through these pretty quick if you're working in industry. You can't be spending days and days and days on making 1 comic page. You've got to do your comic page, sometimes 2 comic pages in 1 day. So 1 there, and then we can have another one here of the shop, and then you can have a thin panel here with his hands in the jewellery, and then I think you can have like your villain popping out over these panels, just to add a bit extra dimension to what you're doing. So I'm personally going to go with this one. You don't have to. You can do any of these that you want. It's up to you. But personally, I would say that's the best way of doing it. So next we get a bit of A4 paper, and we're going to move on to roughs. So next stage we're going to move on to is the rough layouts. Okay, this doesn't have to be the neatest thing in the world. I am going to use my ruler for a few bits just to keep it fairly neat as I can make it. If I was going to be doing this at home just for myself, it would be a scribbly mess. But for you, I'm going to be really kind and keep it nice and neat. So just draw your rectangle, which is going to be representative of your page. And then we're doing this one here. So with this one, of course, you've got your main villain popping out of the screen, or the page rather. So draw your panels. Again, these don't have to be mathematically correct, just however you want them to be. You also need to make sure you're leaving space for your text as well in these. Something a lot of artists forget about is that you do have to leave that space, because as an artist it's very easy to get carried away and start drawing all over the place and not leaving enough space for any words. I think that's why most writers of comics kind of keep their words quite brief. So of course you've got the cityscape here, which is going to be, let's see, doesn't have to be perfect, like I said. This is just something to go off like a storyboard. And your crack of lightning in the background. Where you'll probably have your text would be up here. So make sure you draw a box where your text is going to be. The next bit we're going to be doing is the shop. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know off the top of my head how to draw a shop. I know it's just a building, but sometimes you get a little bit stuck. So my recommendation is using your laptop and getting on a website like Pinterest and just searching something along the lines of shop front. Of course, don't copy it, but get something that you think would be good. Something at an angle as well. So that would be perfect. For those who would like to see, that's it there. You're just getting the basic feel of it. Make sure you keep your perspective right. Again, because this is just a rough, that doesn't have to be perfect. Let's have so this is your doorway. Let's have the door wide open. Maybe with a smashed window as well. Because villains are in there. And then what we can do as well is add a little bit more dimension to this. Maybe put a getaway car in front of the store as well. Again, this is how I'm interpreting the script that I've got. You can do it whatever way you want. And panel 3, hands in a pile of jewels. So it can be as simple as you like. It's a hand coming out of a pile of jewels. And then you want your villain popping off the screen as well. There's dialogue there. So if you want them popping out, what you got to do is try and try and make that literal as well. So he has to come above the panels as well. So let's have him. What I'd do as well, to make it seem like he's got all of the power in this situation, is have it so the reader has to look up at him. Kind of like a camera, you're looking upwards in a camera, and it gives you that. So he's got jewels falling between his fingers. What this bit is, this line here, this is just so you know where like the nose is going to go and the eyes and all the features. Give him a maniacal laugh as well. So see how he's popping above that panel as well. So that's how I'd go about doing that. The next thing we need to do is move on to the polished bit of artwork. So now we're going to move on to penciling our artwork. The way I would start is first creating your border around your comic. So, see, I've drawn a line here. All I've done is taken my ruler and placed it up against here. Do it on each side of your A3 paper, or A4 if you want to use A4. So if we split that into thirds, you're looking at roughly about 12 centimetres each. So just make yourself a little mark every 12 centimetres. Again, this is just how I work. You don't have to do the same. And then cut this top bit in half. So it's going to be 24. So you're looking at just about 12. Now obviously your first panel isn't going to go down to this third. It's probably going to go at the halfway mark between them, because this needs to be the biggest panel on there. So there. Again, your pencil lines are going to be erased later on. So just work very lightly, because you're going to go over it with ink. So get rid of those little lines there. Not uber important, just that stops me getting confused later. Now the top panel overlaps the panel beneath, the panel that comes after it. So you want to make sure you carry that forward in your artwork. And then that'll probably come down to say that third, because we want our main character to stand out a lot. So I would probably say maybe he's about here. Rule of thumb, if you're working on A3, have about half a centimetre between your panels, unless of course you're doing this fancy stuff I'm doing up here. So have that there. That doesn't need to go all the way along. I'd say to about there, the 4.5 inch mark. Then straight down. So now you've got your panels laid out, ready for you to do your artwork onto them. Okay? So cityscapes, again, just like the shop front, not something you're really going to know very well off the top of your head unless you are an architect, either that or a real building buff. So where are most of these superhero comics set? New York, obviously New York. I don't think it's even that dangerous of a city, but apparently they're all based in New York. So let's find ourselves a New York skyline on Pinterest or one of those similar kind of websites. Going through Pinterest, come across this image of a New York skyline. Now, this is set at night, so you don't have to be super duper detailed with it. And to be honest with you, half your readers probably never been to New York anyway, so you don't really have to be that accurate either. But everyone does know of the Empire State Building, so make sure you do that bit justice. So there you've got your outline of the cityscape. Now most of this is going to be done in complete black because it's going to be night time and we're going to have a crack of lightning behind it as well. Now the crack of lightning, just do a line and then just have a fork coming off there. Doesn't have to be lifelike. Just something pretty cool. And that's going to light up the sky behind it as well. So when we're going over it with our black ink, this bit around it is going to be quite light and you're just going to see the outline of the cityscape. Our next panel is going to be the jewels and stuff jewellery shop. So this is where we have to try our hardest to get our perspective correct. Not the funnest element of art and design, but it is what it is and it needs to be done if you want your drawings to look lifelike. So you find your angle and then you do a straight line up to separate the shops. Now as you're pointing in different directions here and drawing in the different angles, bear in mind that this bit here, this line, is not going to be the same as this line, just as this line is not the same as that line. They all feed into the middle bit. So the middle of your perspective is going to be about here. But of course, if you draw from there, it's going to look really skew with. So you've got to bear in mind your entire angle comes to about here and here. So find it like there. So it's going to be roughly there to find the perfect angle for your window. You know, I might put the logo into the window instead. And don't forget, windows are also reflective. So we do a couple of lines. It'll show that off a bit without having to draw too much detail. And then we need to draw the door. Right, next we're going to have our car in there, in this bit over here. Now, we're going to go back to the computer because I want to figure out the sort of car that a villain would really drive. You don't want to just be chucking a Ford Fiesta in there, because anyone can drive a Ford Fiesta. You want to give this villain the character. So I'm thinking either a van, which is a very villainous kind of vehicle, unless of course you work in trade, or something really, really old, like an old gangster car. So I'm going to search that, gangster car. Something like this, which is apparently a 1969 Lincoln. So it's got a big grille at the front. Again, you're going to be going over this with ink, so don't worry about it being perfect. And then next to that, we'll just draw a standard door and window. And follow the perspective line from the other door. Logo on his car as well. Right, so there's that bit. Next, we're going to have a hand coming out of a pile of jewels. Now, hands are infamously a pain in the butt to draw. So we're going to start with the jewels, make a little mountain of jewels. Okay. And then just start putting things in. There's your jewel there. So this class isn't about drawing techniques. That can be done at a later date. It's about storytelling. That's the most important part of this. You'll read a million comics, and some of them can't even draw to save their life, but they write great stories, and that's the more important side of this. Diamond ring there. So we'll come back to this bit in the inking and get that all detailed up. Now we come to the bit that nobody seems to like, drawn the hands. So no one really has an excuse for being bad at drawing hands, because we all have them. And you can just use them as a reference. So for example, I'm going to use the one we got right now. So when you break your fingers and your hands down into parts, it makes it a lot easier for you to draw. There's. Right. The next thing is figuring out who your villain is. Now, like I've said, this can be an existing villain if you want it to be, or it can be a brand new one that you've come up with. I'm going to come up with a brand new one. So, go back to your sketch pad. Who could this be? So, he's obviously a thief, loves jewels, And if we're going from our script, where he said being the bad guy isn't so bad, he obviously likes what he does. So I think we're talking about a professional here, a professional jewel thief, not just some guy who's come up on hard times and wants to make a little bit of money to pay his bills. We're looking at someone who is a bona fide villain. So what do thieves normally wear? Well, if we're going to go by stereotypes, it's going to be a balaclava, isn't it? So I'm going to just roughly draw a face. Of course, do my normal lines to get where it's going to be for his nose and his other features. His shoulders as well. There we go. I think that's a good rough idea for a villain. Of course, if you want to use the Joker from Batman or Dr. Octopus or whoever, if you're making a fan comic or something, feel free to do that. So we have him making this kind of pose here, make him extra intimidating. Now this does cover up the shards of glass, so let's add a few more down there. Right, so that is the penciling stage all done. Right, so the next stage in your comic creation process is going to be inks. Now, once upon a time, in the days of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, inks would be done by a completely separate artist. But the benefit of being a comic artist now is that you can take full charge of your own work. The downside to that is it means you have to do everything yourself. But it does mean that you don't have to put your trust in someone else to do this, which can be a hard thing to do sometimes. So pick up your fine liner and make sure you have your brush pen or your marker at the ready, and you're still going to be using your ruler as well. Now I'm going to start with Mr. Smiley here, which is what I've decided to call him, because he is the foreground of pretty much the entire picture. He's the main thing that your eye comes into focus in when you look at the picture. So let's start with him. I like to start with the nose for some reason. I don't know why, and it's probably very strange to many people, but I just do. So let's get his nose drawn. Right, the little thing I'm doing here is called etching, where you do these little lines to add shadow detail to it. Again, it's not important that you're the best drawer in the world to create a comic. You just got to know the techniques of storytelling. And now you do have different weights for these pens. This is a 0.1. I don't think it's thick enough for what I'm trying to do. So I'll pick this up. This is a 0.8. That's better. So when you're doing the little etching, like it was there, the 0.1s are brilliant for that. But for the real meaty line work, you want to make sure you're using a thicker pen. A lot of the time these come in packs, so you can get a pack of 3 or 4 different pens of different weights, and that will be of great benefit to you down the line. It's just like using a pencil as well, except you've got to be careful not to make mistakes. But luckily you'll have made your mistakes with the pencil beforehand. And sometimes it's easier just to move the paper around instead of moving the direction you're drawing in. Make sure you press down a little harder and maybe go over it once more on the eye, especially the top lid, just to get some of the eyebrow done. Sorry, the eyelash. And don't forget, eyes have lids. Get the shadow under the lip, because your underlip does cast quite a big shadow. There we go. Now I'd imagine with this being a jewellery shop, they'd have quite thick glass, so make sure you add some extra lines to show that. Right. So now we got to do the lighting across the sky, which shouldn't be too difficult. We just got to do. Make sure we keep the tops of the buildings clear. So that is a completed comic page. Well, say completed. Could do with a splash of colour, couldn't it? But hopefully we can get along to that with a bit of colour, some words, and just maybe adding some digital touches to this in the future. I've been Jay Horner, working with Hartlepool Borough Council, and I'll catch you down the road.